back to another psychology and shadow work YouTube video. Today we're talking about blocks, like something that might come up while you're doing shadow work where you are just hitting a wall and not proceeding forward. Specifically, we're going to be looking at rumination. Now, the shadow work prompts for this are going to be for the second and above tiers on my Patreon, but in general, rumination is something that's very important to know about. In psychology, rumination doesn't just mean to sit and consider something. It means you sit and consider it repeatedly, and repeatedly. Rather than coming to a place where you process the issue, you resolve it, you maybe problem solve or whatnot, instead, your brain kind of falls into a mental track or a loop in which you end up experiencing negative emotions just on repeat. And so it has been correlated to kind of just depression and anxiety and all that, because you're not moving forward, you're just experiencing those negative emotions all over again. And of course, like if those emotions are tied to like stress hormones such as cortisol, whatnot, you're literally just like looping. So when you're doing shadow work and you're considering something important that has happened in your life, maybe a relationship that fell to pieces, something like that, what's important to consider is how often you are returning to that spot. Have you proceeded forward in your life since then, or do you come back to the same place to feel the same emotions every time? There's a couple reasons why we might do this. If there's trauma involved, in which case you definitely do need to go actually talk to a licensed, registered mental health professional, then it may be that you have a reinforced framework of perception in your head. Essentially, when something like that happens, your brain creates neural pathways that if you come back to it and reinforce it, especially if you're still in the environment in which you're not safe, or you were there for a while, then your brain's going to return to the pathways. And it's not about just like, oh, you need to stop thinking about it or you need to get over it. You're going to have to recognize, if you're in a place of rumination, that this is an established neural pathway in your brain, and because it is literally established there, it's not going to be as simple as, oh, I'm going to stop thinking about it, because now your brain has that pathway and now you need to create new ones instead. So when it comes to doing shadow work, you might find yourself in a place of, wow, I have been here again and again and again and again, and I don't really want to be here anymore. Why am I still here? And the first place you're going to want to consider is literally like, how often have I been here? How many times have I returned to this place? Do I feel like I'm actually processing it, or am I reliving it over and over and over? Sometimes we get in a rumination loop because, well, actually it's what our brain knows. It feels safe and comfortable, even though it's not healthy, but it is what we know, so our brain keeps coming back to it. So getting out of a rumination loop may involve recognizing, you know what? This is what is comfortable to me. I know that it's not healthy. I know where I came from wasn't healthy, or my environment wasn't healthy, but it's what my brain knows. Therefore, I keep coming back to it because, well, the things that are healthy can be scary. And that's just because they can be very unfamiliar, or we possibly have this framework of like, I'm going to fail at being healthy. And so we might literally just like automatically avoid healthier processes or looking into them simply out of a sense of like, I'm not going to make it anyway. So while you're doing your shadow work, you may also need to look at, am I in this rumination loop because I don't think I can actually succeed in moving forward? And a rumination loop doesn't necessarily have to be like out of trauma or anything like that. It can also be about like things that we really enjoyed or a good moment that happened, but we also attach like a, oh, if only to it, or it's just things like, oh, what if I had done this instead? And you kind of get stuck in that maladaptive daydreaming thing where you're like, oh, well, I guess like I could have done this at the time, or what about this? And instead you just keep going, or da-da-da-da-da, like this. So the goal of shadow work, if you are kind of like stuck in that place and you're like, wow, I really have not been progressing forward spiritually, emotionally, etc., your next step right now is to look at what are those crucial moments in your memories and emotions, and how often are you returning to them. So if you want to go look at the journaling prompts for that, that's going to be in the Patreon. And coming up next, we're going to be talking about archetypes. And that one's going to be available to all tiers. Thank you for listening in, and let me know, comment, is there something within like psychology, shadow work, witchy, pagan, or even spiritual Christian things that you would like to hear me talk about? Thanks, guys.